Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show. The medical marijuana for you and me. Ah, yeah, the medical marijuana. Whoa, 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 yeah, the medical. It's the medical marijuana show. You will know.
I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. Hey, boy, don't feel my world untrue. Yeah, I want to talk to you. My world can be true if you do what I tell you to. I want to talk to you.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Medical Marijuana Radio. This one is for Saturday, the 17th of September, 2016. I'm your host, Larry Love. We're here every week to bring you the latest information on medical cannabis from all over the globe, adult use cannabis from where it's legal, and we want to bring you the good information. This week, our guest will be Peter St. Cyr, an Emmy Award-winning journalist from here in New Mexico, covering the medical cannabis industry in the Department of Health and government here in New Mexico for the last decade or so. And we'll have a nice interview with him as soon as we give you some news. And, of course, we always have news for you. And we're just going to get right into it, okay? Some good news, actually, in a couple of places. A woman in Florida, Bridget Kerouac, was found not guilty of cultivating and possessing cannabis. It's a very interesting story, and it's really a jury nullification type of thing. Here is this report from Florida.
Her own words, the Martin County woman on trial for growing marijuana in her home defends herself on the stand. She told a jury she needed the pot to ease her pain. And now the case, which legal analysts nationwide are watching very closely, is in the hands of a jury. News Channel 5's Jason Hackett has the emotional testimony.
I'm not a criminal, I'm a patient. All I'm trying to do is survive.
With tears in her eyes, Bridget Kerouac takes the stand, giving an emotional and at times personal testimony.
When you get to that point and you have tried as many of the options that are available to you as I have, dying becomes a very attractive prospect.
Kerouac says years of poor health left her in constant suffering.
I have low back pain, I have hip pain, I have knee pain, I have foot pain.
After prescription meds proved ineffective, she claims her doctor in Maine recommended marijuana. Kerouac then testified she then moved to Florida for the warmer weather.
It gives me some measure of a life back.
But prosecutors focused on that decision and the legality of her cannabis use.
Did you know that Florida did not have medical marijuana laws?
I did.
Okay. So, but you made the choice to move to Florida despite the fact that cannabis is the only thing that apparently helps you with your ailments. You still moved to Florida anyways.
That's correct.
Kerouac's attorneys countered with a medical necessity defense and argued her need outweighs the law.
There's a plant that can ease that pain, that she can grow in her garage, not harming anybody.
The state fired back.
And the law is simple. The defendant manufactured cannabis.
Jason Hackett, WPTV News Channel 5.
So the jury fought back and found her not guilty of cultivating and possessing medical cannabis, even in a state where you're not allowed to grow. Bravo. Bravo. More than the good news. New Jersey. We're going to move up the coast from Florida to New Jersey. Governor of New Jersey, Governor Cheesesteak, has approved the use of medical marijuana for PTSD. This is an amazing thing to me.
Governor Christie says he supported the bill because an estimated 20% of veterans returning home from war in Iraq and Afghanistan suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder.
For me, it means in the state of New Jersey, veterans are valued.
The law adds PTSD to a growing list of conditions that qualify patients for medical marijuana, and as Senator Nick Scutari, co-sponsor of the bill, points out, New Jersey is home to more than 400,000 vets.
There has been studies that shows that our veterans particularly, as well as other individuals that suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, could benefit from the use of medical marijuana. So including it was a natural offshoot of the original medical marijuana program, and I'm thrilled that he signed it.
The emergency of the suicide rate of veterans, just the fact that they are killing themselves as fast or faster than dying in combat, you don't have to understand why. Understand that it's a fact, and what can you do about it? And if the answer is everything possible, you should start with cannabis, not as a last resort.
But patients will first have to show their condition is resistant to other traditional medical therapies, like antidepressants and counseling. As the governor stipulated in the bill signing, that's to prevent misuse and abuse of the substance. Yet in his statement, the governor said the mere potential for abuse by some should not deter the state from taking action that may ease the daily struggles of our veterans and others who legitimately suffer from PTSD.
Some studies showed that antidepressants, for example, that are the typical treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder, are only as effective as a placebo. And, you know, they don't treat the underlying condition, whereas marijuana therapy can actually help to reverse the aversive memories.
It helps me focus, it helps me sleep, it helps me eat.
Symptoms of PTSD can include severe anxiety, suicidal thoughts, flashbacks, and insomnia. According to the Department of Veterans Affairs, about 7.7 million Americans suffer from it. Philippe Dumais served in Iraq from 2007 to 2009 and lives with it daily.
It's kind of sad that the veterans have to be the forefront, because this bill is a bill we've been trying to push for going on 2 years now. And last year it got denied, but when we started doing the veteran push and everything like that, all of a sudden, I don't know, it's because of this election, all of a sudden that stuff is being done.
The Coalition for Medical Marijuana of New Jersey has been a leading lobbyist on the issue. The founders note that you don't have to seek combat to suffer from PTSD.
When all else fails, this is what helps them, and so that's the most important part of that. So it's really indisputable, the science and the medicine on this.
Bill co-sponsor Senator Joe Vitale believes the governor's signature means he may be open-minded to further expansion. Right now, 6 medical conditions qualify for medical cannabis. Army specialist Leo Bridgewater believes the benefits could be long-lasting.
States that have an expansive medicinal marijuana program are now starting to see a significant drop in opioid abuse and addiction issues. As a matter of fact, doctors are prescribing it a lot less now.
The law takes effect immediately, though the Department of Health is now tasked with forming regulations to determine the criteria for use. Bill sponsors and advocates say they'll be watching closely. At the State House, I'm Brianna Venozzi, NJTV News.
Well, thank you, Governor Christie, for allowing the veterans and other people with PTSD to use cannabis for their illness. Unfortunately, it should be the first line of medication to be taken. I hope that you don't keep these people suffering with opioids and depression-type medicine for very long. I hope they can show that they've already tried all that stuff in the past and they can get right into using cannabis. So thank you, Governor. Moving across the country to Humboldt County, they're working to expand their medical marijuana cultivation areas. California is hurting with water and power, and it's a very big footprint, indoors and outdoors, in California to grow cannabis, and things do have to change. Here's this report from Humboldt County.
The Humboldt County Board of Supervisors is working on an environmental impact report. This is an assessment of where cultivation can be done without negative effects to the environment, all in an effort to reduce the environmental footprint that medical marijuana cultivation has on Humboldt County. County staff met with the State Department of Food and Agriculture today. North Coast News' Symphony Sherman has more on that topic tonight.
With the possibility of recreational marijuana becoming legal, the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors is working to regulate the industry before it's too late.
We've got to find a way to make this work in a way that we can have some kind of say in what people do, because clearly, without any regulations, things have gotten out of hand.
The county's first step was passing a medical marijuana ordinance to prevent pot grows from damaging the environment.
This is a real opportunity for our county and for our community and for our environment to move forward into the 21st century and to protect the environment.
On Tuesday, the board took further action with the ordinance. In a unanimous vote, the board decided to look at different areas where marijuana can be safely cultivated. And once the area is studied, a report will be made looking at environmental factors.
When we go into the environmental impact report, we'll be looking at how the program might impact the environment, and if it does, how it can be mitigated, what we can do.
The board voted to do the impact report in phases due to the cost, how long it takes, and to allow people to still get permitted under the current land use ordinance. But because of a lawsuit against the county, people can't file for a permit after December 31st until the report is complete.
Given that we already had one lawsuit that we had to deal with, we believe that we have to be extremely robust in doing the environmental impact report, and so it's going to take time and it's going to take more money.
But by doing this multi-phase approach, growers can begin applying for permits once the first phase of the environmental impact report is complete.
That was Symphony Sherman reporting.
Thank you, Cynthia Sherman. Staying with California, here's a report from KQED. Why can't medical marijuana patients take their medicine in the hospital? It is a real medicine. It's a legal medicine in California and other states. So here's this report from Kelly.
Medical marijuana may be legal in California, but hospitals don't allow patients to openly consume it. One retired physician in Marin is hoping to change that. Dr. Larry Bedard with the Marin Healthcare District Board plans to introduce a resolution at tonight's board meeting that would begin the process of making Marin General Hospital the first to allow the open consumption of medical marijuana. Larry Bedard joins me now. What would open consumption look like at the hospital?
I believe it would look like virtually any other medicine that is ordered by a physician. Ideally, I would envision where a physician writes in the order book THC 25 milligrams as needed for sleep, 25 milligrams for chronic pain. I think there's good scientific evidence that for chronic pain, neuropathy, particularly an AIDS patient, there's no question the science is there that medicinal cannabis is beneficial.
So it's not like folks would be smoking it in their rooms?
No, it's not like just, rolling up a joint and smoking cannabis leaves is not acceptable.
How is medical marijuana being consumed now? Because in many cases it is, as you've described, in a don't ask, don't tell mode.
Right. I think what happens is family members bring it in, friends bring it in. Obviously, in most of those cases, it's brought in as an edible. So I think what happens is you don't want to ask the nurse, gee, is it all right if I bring my father, a marijuana brownie? And she doesn't want you to ask the question. So it's clearly don't ask, don't tell.
And what's the potential harm in that, in having patients doing it on the down low if, say, it avoids concerns about running afoul of federal or state laws?
The problem is many patients in the hospital are on several different drugs. And if a patient has an adverse reaction, it has to be investigated by the pharmacist. And it's just for good medical care, I think it should be open and transparent. I don't think there's any advantages to having it, don't ask, don't tell, other than the fact the patient gets to use something that they've been successfully using as an outpatient. But that's not the way medicine should be practiced.
The California Hospital Association told the Chronicle that they're concerned the federal government, because it still considers marijuana a dangerous drug, could clamp down on the hospital in ways including revoking federal funding or denying federal funding or an ability to dispense drugs, which would force Marin General to close. What's your response to those concerns?
Well, I think it is a legitimate concern. I think many hospital administrators are overly concerned because they don't understand what the current law is. The Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment prohibits the Department of Justice from using any federal funds to either prosecute patients, physicians, or I think hospitals if they're abiding by their state law. Currently, the state law in California is you can use medicinal cannabis. Nothing in state law prohibits a patient from using cannabis in a hospital. So I think it's in compliance with state law. I think the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment protects hospitals and physicians from retaliation by the federal government.
Larry Bedard with the Marin Healthcare District Board. Thanks for talking with us.
Appreciate.
Again, that was from KQED in San Francisco. Yeah, it's a real medicine, so why not administer it in a hospital as well as anywhere else? Montana has had some incredible problems with the medical program over the last few years. They've cut back on the dispensaries and how many patients a dispensary can help and caregivers and so forth. Here is a Montana lung cancer patient fighting for her life.
And a Montana nonprofit has filed a complaint which could temporarily stop the state government from enforcing a new medical marijuana law. And for some members of the group, they say this is more than a political issue. For them, it's a matter of life or death. ABC Fox Montana's Melinda Zosh has the story.
Melody Brown of Great Falls is known to her family and friends as a fighter.
I want to live. I'm not ready to die. I'm only 59 years old.
Last November, doctors diagnosed Brown with stage 4 lung cancer. They gave her only 6 more months to live.
It comes like this in a syringe.
Brown believes there's one thing that's keeping her going.
But I'm alive today because of cannabis oil.
Every 4 hours, Brown swallows these cannabis oil pills. She says her medication calms her body and her mind.
Because a lot of times I get upset. You know, it's upsetting to know that you might not be here tomorrow.
Since her diagnosis last year, Brown says her life is turned upside down. She's given up her career as a lawyer, given up her home to move into this apartment with her son, and now a new state law could force her to give up her medication.
I'm not kind of worried. I'm extremely worried. I don't know what I'm going to do.
The source of her concern is Senate Bill 423, which became a law on August 31st. It limits the number of patients a medical marijuana caregiver can help. The law says that caregivers can provide medical cannabis for only 2 patients at a time, or 3 if the caregiver is also a patient. The Department of Health and Human Services says there are about 13,000 medical marijuana patients like Brown living in Montana. With the limited number of providers in the state, this law could leave these patients without access to their medical cannabis.
I don't understand how the legislature, none of whom are medical people, can make a decision that so adversely affects my life.
Brown is a board member of the nonprofit called Montanans Ensuring Access to Natural Medicines. And on September 7th, the group filed a lawsuit against the state, and their lawyer, Bruce Fredrickson, says their goal
is to hopefully prevent the state from being able to enforce that 3-patient limit, at least as it relates to those patients named in the complaint.
Brown's medical cannabis supply is almost gone, and doctors have now given her another 6 months to a year to live, and she says she'll keep on fighting. Reporting in Great Falls, Melinda Zosh, ABC Fox, Montana News.
How government can make people suffer is just beyond me. How Montana, who had a medical program going for years and was flourishing, has just turned it around to actually hurt people who are dying. Before we take a break and talk to Peter St. Cyr, here's one last story from Salem, Ohio. A doctor there is uncomfortable prescribing medical marijuana.
It'll be at least a year before we know under what conditions doctors in Ohio will recommend medical marijuana. And pot advocates say that's too long, mainly because the law is already in effect. But meanwhile, a number of doctors say they're uncomfortable prescribing pot to patients as things stand now. Because as Michelle Nix reports, they feel there are too many unanswered questions.
The law making medical marijuana legal in Ohio went into effect September 8th. But according to Ohio lawmakers, it could be September of 2018, 2 years from now, before a safe, effective medical marijuana product is available to prescribe to Ohioans. Dr. Michael Sevilla of Salem tells me he's one of a number of doctors around the state uncomfortable with prescribing cannabis.
There's a lot of physicians that I talk to, they're uncomfortable with medical marijuana, mainly because there's not a lot of research out there yet. There's not a lot of definitive data saying, hey, we feel comfortable, we know that it's a good medicine, or we don't know that's a good medicine. We need more research.
But he says his patients are already asking for it.
One of the things I'm very concerned about is everybody remembers Ohio's, pill mill problem as far as prescribing pain medicines. And, is Ohio going to be, a pot mill state? Is it going to be very regulated or not regulated?
Dr. Sevilla says just because it's legal doesn't mean physicians are obligated to prescribe it. And he makes it clear he's not totally against medical marijuana, but believes the rules and regulations need to be crystal clear.
And I'm hoping that the regulators in Columbus do this the right way as far as, who's going to prescribe it, who's going to grow it, who's going to distribute it.
With more local news, I'm Michelle Nix.
Pills kill, cannabis cures. We'll be right back with Peter St. Cyr.
It's all about the 420 MMJ Radio.
Hey, this is Scott from Rare Dagnus. You're listening to Medical Marijuana Radio.
And we're back. And online today, I'm happy to have Emmy Award winning independent journalist here in New Mexico, Peter St. Cyr, who for the last decade has been covering the medical cannabis industry here in New Mexico and around the country. Welcome, Peter.
Good morning, Larry. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks, and I'm happy that you're able to come and spend some time with us today. You've been very prolific here in New Mexico regarding the Department of Health and the medical cannabis industry and open government and so forth. So, how did your interest start in the cannabis industry and the Department of Health here?
Well, I've been a government watchdog reporter for a long time, and had a huge interest in public health programs and the administration of them by the executive agencies under both, Governor Bill Richardson and now under Governor Susana Martinez. For a news person, the medical cannabis story is a compelling story for all the right reasons. And really, news people tend to look at stories that involve public health, that involve the government. But in this one, there's so much conflict between state and federal, and we like to cover things that have conflict to figure out what's going on. There are a ton of interesting people involved in this emerging industry, and the characters that I get to meet have very compelling stories. Newsman likes to feature people, so that attracted me to the story very much. And then the other element from a news perspective is that it's very new, and news people like to cover things that are new. And so when I put all those things up and realized that really nobody else was covering it, I thought, what a great opportunity to cover the medical cannabis industry along its growth, and just to watch it grow, to meet interesting people and to tell their stories. Many of them, suffered from debilitating medical conditions for a long time. And to see them really benefit from medical cannabis and to be able to tell those stories was great. And then, of course, there have been some problems in the administration of this program by the bureaucrats. And
well, there's been a lot of secrecy involved in it. Okay, that's one major thing. I think a lot of that had to do with New Mexico being one of the early medical cannabis states that passed medical cannabis. The federal government really wasn't on board at the time, so they kept a lot of things secret. And I think that's where you and your open government lawsuits and so forth have brought into the light, the truth that is out there and what's going on in the business. And of course, it's gotten a lot better over the last few years federally. But tell me, what were your thoughts before delving into the medical cannabis industry? What were your personal thoughts about cannabis at that time? Was it a surprise to you that it was indeed a medicine?
I, certainly had heard and probably been influenced by a lot of the stigmas growing up, with conservative parents who wanted us to focus on things other than drugs in the 70s. But I think that I did talk to some patients very early on that had told me about the benefits and how it was helping them improve their quality of life. So I did the research and reading, met people like you, and started hearing the stories that really persuaded me that it is a great medicine for helping people that doesn't leave them all strung out on, opiates or other harder narcotics.
So when you started, at the beginning of your quest, a decade ago with the DOH and so forth, everything again was secret. So you had run up against some brick walls where they just really wouldn't tell you what was going on. So how did you fix that?
Well, yeah. So the Department of Health created a rule under their administrative code that shielded the names and all the information about the original 25 and then 23 producers. And it made it difficult for even getting simple things like inspection reports on whether, producers were adhering to the rules in manufacturing and production, and if the medication was being treated safely. We know this when we go to a restaurant. They put red and green stickers on the front door. But when we would ask for copies of the public records of inspection sheets, we get them back, and there was really never any glaring errors or problems. But even then, the names were redacted. So even if something huge had been discovered during an inspection, we would not have been able to report it. And then when the state of New Mexico discovered in a patient survey in 2013 that there really was a chronic shortage of medication around the state, they decided to increase the plant counts from 150 to 450. Many of your regular listeners already know that. But the then Health Secretary, Retta Ward, said that after they went through the rulemaking process to increase the plant count, that she would consider adding 12 new producers. And at that very moment, and I'm going to say April or May of 2014, I decided that the patients, the public, and everybody should know who is applying for the licenses, similar to the fact that we know who the finalists are going to be for a police chief or a school university president. And I know that the patients were interested in knowing, the experience of growing and handling medical grade cannabis. They were also interested in hearing more about the applicants' nonprofit missions. These programs are supposed to be set up to operate in a nonprofit manner. And the reason that it was set up that way originally was that the folks that were developing the program thought that it would be better to have patients serving on a nonprofit board along with a few healthcare workers in order to keep it patient-centric. And, we decided at the moment that they announced that there may be a dozen new producers to find out who they were. And of course, we were denied access and had to fight for that for about a year. And then they did change the rule, and we've been now getting access to information like those inspection reports, the quarterly financials. We know, who's making money, who's not making money, how they're spending money, how much they're growing and harvesting, who is being efficient and who is not being efficient and helping patients. And so the goal of achieving more transparency in this program through the lawsuit that was filed last July is already starting to pay dividends.
Right, but even though, Peter, that it's starting to pay dividends and things opened up a little bit, there's still we're still steeped in controversy about who got licenses. Okay, for instance, Darren White, former law enforcement person in the Johnson administration, I believe, and is a very controversial guy, and he got a license. And then there's also, I believe, an attorney that worked for the DOH that's involved with one of the companies that got a license. So what's happening after the fact to look at why these people were chosen and how, let's say, a Department of Health attorney is able to be involved?
Well, so we, in April, toward the end of April, got all 84 applications, and we have been slowly going through them. I wish that I had more time in a week to be able to go through them quicker. They're about anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 pages, and it's really slow process going through them, but I have been going through it. As far as the inside track of a Department of Health employee, I've been stonewalled a lot of the way in getting information about what happened there. We do know that after the group that she's serving on the board was selected, that she did change agencies. I'm not sure that that cures the conflict. And I will tell you that I'm working on a follow-up story that should come out in the next week or two involving that, a follow-up on that. Darren White was, I think everyone was surprised to see his involvement originally because of his views earlier in his career. But like so many people whose views, for instance, have evolved on gay marriage, I think Darren's views evolved. He had had a motorcycle accident as a young patrol officer and racked up his back and had been on some of the prescription pain pills that we talked about earlier for years and wanted off of them. It was not, the symptoms and the side effects of those are really kind of debilitating themselves. And, I'm going to say that his views evolved and that it maybe isn't as controversial as everyone wants to make it out to be, because he's put together, from what I've seen in his plan, a really strong nonprofit mission aimed at helping New Mexico veterans, and we'll see how it goes.
Do you think? Well, not do you think, but do you know if Pure Life, which is his involvement in the dispensary and growing business, do you know if they are a true nonprofit? Do they have a management company and so forth? Are you aware of anything?
So I haven't gotten to all the management companies yet, so I don't know. I know a lot of them had to be set up that way to be able to get bank financing and access to banks, to be able to oftentimes even lease rental space. And those are controversial. So I wrote about that in a story in the Santa Fe Reporter back in March about whether they're nonprofits or if that's a whole myth here in New Mexico. And some of the producers retained a former PRC commissioner and attorney, Jason Marks. They're suing to remove the requirement that they be set up as nonprofit, because that's not actually part of the statute that was approved by lawmakers back in 2007. So we'll see how that ends here pretty soon.
What was the reasoning, if you know the answer to this, of the rules making the LNPPs a non-profit? What was that for? Was that to keep prices down, to make sure it didn't run amok and just people making hands over fist and the money hands over fist and the money just flowing in and costing the patients high prices? Do you think that's what's happened?
Well, the Department of Health group that set up the original rules, once the law was adopted, they spent 2 years thinking about it and setting up the rules, and there were meetings. And I did reach out. I'm trying to get to, the facts, and I talked to people like Valerie Hubbard, who was instrumental in getting the law passed. I talked to Senator Cisco McSorley and Senator Jerry Ortiz-Pino, and I got on the phone and I looked up the original House Secretary, Alfred Vigil, who's now a MD in House, and I talked to all of them. And at the same time, New Mexico was setting up its program. Jerry Brown, who was then the Attorney General for the state of California, had put out kind of some guidance and was talking about nonprofits in California. And I think that they adopted a lot of the rationale They did not want this to be a free market, but they also wanted it to be very patient-centric. And in order to make sure that patients were involved in the operations of these new licensees, they set them up as nonprofits. And the rule was that the nonprofit's board had to have, I believe, a minimum of 3 patients on it and at least one healthcare worker, probably a doctor or a nurse practitioner.
Right.
By having patients and healthcare workers on the boards of a nonprofit, I think that the group felt like that it would remain patient-centric. And I don't know that there was much calculus given to all the money flowing in and out. I think that the nonprofit's requirement was primarily, like we've talked about, making sure that the focus was on patients and the patients would have a strong voice in the program. Of course, corporate bylaws, whether it's, for an S corporation, a C corporation, an LLC, or a nonprofit, the bylaws can be structured really to neuter the voices of non-investment board members or, non-equity board members. And their votes can really become advisory only in many cases, depending on how the bylaws are written.
Does your research show that there's actually board meetings being happening with these nonprofits?
I have seen some board meeting minutes. I have not seen them all. And so I don't know if every group is having regular board meetings. You and I have both heard stories that they're set up and never had a board meeting again after that.
Well, I can testify to that. I was on a board for 2 years and we never had a board meeting. So, that's just what my personal experience was, and I can't imagine, what the others are because I'm not involved with those. But things, have changed and have gotten better. There's 35 LNPPs now, and a lot of the new ones are up and running, and more to come soon. But the plan count is still somewhat low, I think, for the amount of patients that are in the program right now. And some LNPPs are just opening up more locations and more locations, and they don't seem to have enough medicine, to cover the patients. So, what do you think is going to happen in the near future to make it better? I mean, is it too soon to have another plant increase, or do you think? I know that Duke Rodriguez from Ultra Health Top Organics has been out there campaigning, for more plants, but of course, he's got a lot of reasons why. He can say it's for the patients, but he also has a deal with a company in Israel to produce product, and he wants to open up 13 more stores. He's got 6 now and go to 19. So there's a lot of expansion without real capabilities of handling that kind of expansion. So what do you think needs to be done to have enough medicine for the patients here? Because we're up to, what are we up to now, patient-wise? 30,000?
Yeah, it's right around 30,000, and that's an 81% increase over the year before. What needs to happen is for the Department of Health to stop bragging about their stern regulations and being boneheaded about predicting the speed and growth of the popularity of this program. Poll after poll shows that more and more people are accepting it as medication. More and more people are prepared for it to be legalized. And so there was an economic report prepared by a UNM economist with a PhD who herself was a former top regulator, who kind of forecast that right now there's only 1.2% of New Mexicans are involved in the program, registered in the program, but that up to 30%, or about a third of New Mexicans, will qualify for the program with one or more of the medical conditions that allow you to register. If 30% over the next 4 or 5 years register for the program because they become comfortable with it as a medication, they hear stories about it improving other people's quality of life,
doctors become more educated and are more willing to refer patients, we're going to have year after year after year of double-digit growth in this program. And the supply cannot be maintained if the plants that producers are allowed to grow are capped while the number of patients continues to grow. And the more demand for limited harvest yield will do nothing but increase prices. And so that's just typical economics 101. And so I think that the caps are not part of the statute. And I've heard some lawmakers on both sides of the aisle talking about going in and reviewing the Lynn and Aaron Compassionate Use Act and maybe putting in some provisions like it says if you have a disease that's not going to be cured, like MS, there's no cure, you're going to have it. So should you have to go through an expensive process to renew every year, or could you just maybe provide an update on your address if it's changed, or if any of those kind of little smaller things have changed? The MS isn't going away. And so I think that lawmakers could open up the act to look at things like patient renewals and this thing about whether or not to cap plants, or to let the market bear it out and allow producers to make their own predictions and develop their own. No one wants to have a lot of inventory of medication lying around because it's not good to have it lying around. You want to harvest it, package it and get it to needy people. And I think that businesses are better prepared to make those calculations than a public health agency who has no business interfering or determining what would be a monopoly and what wouldn't be a monopoly. It's impossible, and I hear it all the time, that there's concerns about monopolization. You can't have it because there are 35 producers in New Mexico, and none of them have 50% of the market, not one. And the classic definition of a monopolization of a market is you have to have at least 50% market share. And I don't see that happening. There will be...
I was just going to say, New Mexico is doing something, because we're talking about plant counts, that other states don't do. Do you have any idea who was the genius that wants to charge $90,000, to grow the maximum amount of 450 plants? I mean, that does put a burden on the LNPPs, and it's a model that we don't see anywhere else. Any idea who came up with this?
I really do not know. It was announced certainly by the Health Secretary, Retta Ward, when she announced the fact that she would be tripling the plant counts. And so I don't know who came up with the $90,000.
Let's just get back for a second. We've been in a terrible situation for the last almost year where the Department of Health is not able, because of the expansion and acceptance of cannabis as medicine, they've just been backlogged, and they've been lying about it for months and months and months in renewals and first-time applications. And what you were just talking about a few moments ago about opening up the statute and changing that, it should be changed not just for the diseases that like MS and cancer and Parkinson's and all that, where it's not going to get that much better. It's got to be changed for everything, because 30,000 renewals next year is going to take the Department of Health a really long time. We're never going to get out of this unless they really make the change to offer a 2 or 3 year card. This way, it doesn't bog them down. Everything just doesn't come up constantly every month, people renewing. So that's what I think really needs to be done. I don't think it should just be for certain afflictions and conditions that are allowed in the program. How do you feel about just opening it up and having a 3 year card?
Well, so I don't know what the time period should be. One of the things that has really hamstrung the department on the renewals is that right now that is one of the few elements of the law that is actually spelled out and required, but the law doesn't tell the Department of Health how they have to renew it. So I think that while people consider dropping renewals or extending them, that in the short term they can do things like renew them just by updating your address rather than having to go through and getting a doctor to recertify you for those conditions, certainly, that aren't going away. So there are some short-term ways to fix it. And, even for new patients, I know that a lot of the producers and the Department of Health have been talking about this concept about presumptive eligibility, which is, you've been diagnosed with cancer, you've been diagnosed with MS or glaucoma, and you are most likely, when we get through all your paperwork, going to qualify to be registered in this program. So we're going to presume you're eligible and give you your card today rather than waiting 45 or 60 days and then going through the application. And if anything changes, we'll take your card away. But in the meantime, here's your medication. So I had not heard of presumptive eligibility. I heard, I think, Willie Ford and Duke Rodriguez talking about it at one of the public hearings. And I said, that makes sense. And
It certainly is happening in other states. If I'm not mistaken, I think maybe Nevada is that way, or some other state that I read about. But you did a lot of work over the last few months with the first quarter figures of the licensed nonprofit producers here in New Mexico, which I went over with a fine-tooth comb, as did a lot of other people. The second quarter is out now. I haven't had a chance to look at it. So can you give me an eyeball of what changes, what differences you saw in growth, or even going the other way with some of the LNPPs?
I did notice some. I saw a few things, that there were 4 producers now generating total receipts of over $1 million, whereas in the first quarter, only one of the producers, Verdes Foundation, was over $1 million. Now there are 4. The market just continues to grow. It's going to be interesting to see the third quarter and the fourth quarter, because then for the first time we'll have a whole year and be able to have a better picture, because I don't think that one quarter does a trend make. But in the second quarter, one of the things that I noticed is, and I've heard you talk about this a lot on your show, is producers who are efficient and producers who are inefficient. And I did see a lot of the producers had, in the second quarter, and I take it back, not a lot. I did see a few producers have the same amount of plants harvested or more plants in production in the second quarter, more plants in the second quarter than they had in the first quarter, yet their yield or their harvest was about the same amount of grams. And that makes no sense to me. How can you have more plants and less yield? And I'm sure that some of the producers are listening, and hopefully they'll call and educate me about how that can happen.
Yeah, they're welcome to call me too, because that's one thing that really jumped out at me in the first quarter results, is that some producers who have been doing this for 5 and 6 years are getting 3 ounces or 4 ounces a plant. That's not going to do any good for the patients. And like you said, even growing more plants, if their average is going to be the same, they've got to beef it up. And I think that there should be some criteria that if out of X amount of years, if you're not producing at all, and I know there's some producers out there that still maybe have zero production. I think they're waiting for legalization to have first crack at that, which is really a disservice to the people of New Mexico. I think that maybe some licenses should be taken away from people who aren't producing up to a certain standard that needs to be set.
I see it differently than you, Larry. And I see it differently because, right now it's not a free market, but I think that there has to be a shift, and we need to make this a free market, because markets tend to benefit consumers, and in this case, patients, always, because people are going to set up businesses to solve patients' problems. And if they're remove the plant count to keep up with demand, I think that there's room in this market to let the big boys have their economies of scale and be able to grow a lot of different things and manufacture a lot of the cannabis-derived products. But then I think it's also excellent that, like in the beer industry, we have these microbrews and these artisans that craft their beer for a certain reason. And why not have a free market that allows the harvest yield to be boosted, but still allow these smaller operators to focus on products that they believe patients are looking for. And there should be no level where you lose your license unless you're not producing at all, or you violate the law, because those people may have a different business goal and be appealing to some patients. But if we remove the cap and let the free market work, then the patients would have a wider variety of products and strains.
Okay, with
is
that,
always a good thing.
With that in mind, though, okay, Duke Rodriguez, Ultra Health Top Organics, has been out there campaigning, for legalization, which I am totally for. But I'm only for legalization as long as it doesn't hurt the medical cannabis industry. Okay, a lot of states, Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, especially Washington, their medical industry is literally going away because of legalization. So my personal opinion, which I can give because I'm not a journalist, is that we need to protect the medical industry. Now, New Mexico is a border state to Colorado, which is legal for adults, and Arizona may well also pass in November, and Nevada is probably going to pass. So I mean, we're in an area of the country where legalization for adult use is going to happen, and it needs to happen here in New Mexico. I just think the state needs the money on that they can generate from recreational adult use cannabis. We have one of the poorest states. Our education is bad. It really could help. Do you think, after listening to Senator Ortiz-Pino and others, and Duke Rodriguez, that we have a chance in this next session, or do you think that Susana Martinez is just so far, under the pressure of the Koch brothers and others just to stay with the party? Do you think we have a chance?
I really kind of think that all revenue options should be on the table, and that members of both sides of the aisle will consider the revenues that could be generated from a legal market in New Mexico. It would create over 10,000 new jobs. Those people would continue to spend their payroll in other industries, eating out, buying a house, buying a car. Those 10,000 or 11,000 workers. Plus, New Mexico absolutely needs to take a leadership position in the legalization of cannabis. We have miles and miles that border Texas, and as New Mexicans will be going to Colorado and maybe now into Arizona, there certainly should be no reason why Texans shouldn't be coming to New Mexico and benefiting our economy. I think that within the first year of legalization in Colorado, it was $1 billion. We know New Mexico is much smaller, both in population and income levels. But if we got a half of that and $500 million, the GRT generated for that would be probably able to offset up to a quarter or 25% of the state's budget deficit, which is estimated to be, between the end of last fiscal year in June and the beginning of this fiscal year to be over $600 million. Then why not consider every revenue option? It is the only new industry that will generate that kind of new tax revenue.
Absolutely. Peter, any final thoughts of anything that you wanted to tell the listeners today, or do you think we covered it pretty much for now?
I think that I always enjoy talking to you about these things and hearing your stories from your own sources. And I will be telling you, I'm going to be studying this differentiation between medical programs and full legalization. You and I had a talk recently, I think we were eating out at a Chinese restaurant, about ginger. There are ginger medical grade supplements that people can buy over the counter. And then there's just, ginger root that you can use to spice up your own food. Or I know I've taken ginger as medication when I have an upset stomach, but I've also enjoyed ginger in my iced tea and different foods. And I don't know where I'm at yet on, the differentiation between, a patient medical program. And I guess that the primary focus would be on testing, because patients normally have suppressed immune systems. And, so one of the differentiations would absolutely have to be on testing, because we don't want sick people getting sicker.
Absolutely. I think that testing for pesticides is very, very important, and hopefully we can get that done in the future. Well, Peter, I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule today to talk to us. And it's really all about the truth in reporting, and the truth in public programs and so forth. And thank you for fighting for that for us.
Well, thank you for having me on, Larry, and for being such a great supporter. And actually also thank you for your insight. I have only a decade, and I know that you've been studying and following this for a lot longer. And so I often appreciate your insights and your guidance as well.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Things to think about. Yeah.
Thanks. I look forward to anything that you're writing next. I'm always looking forward to your work. Thanks very much, and we'll be right back after this. Well, I want to thank Peter St. Cyr for being our guest and telling us the truth about what's happening in government and in the medical cannabis program here in New Mexico. Sometimes the truth hurts, but we got to know what it is, because that's reality. And think about that when you go to vote in November. I also want to thank my two radio mentors, both with the initials HS. Thank you for your inspiration. If you'd like to be a guest on this show, if you're a patient, want to tell your story, if you have a product, a website, you're an activist, info@mmjradio.com. Again, it's info@mmjradio.com. If you'd like to listen to some of our old shows, we've been doing this for 7 seasons now, 7 years. It's mmjradio.com. My YouTube channel and SoundCloud channels are MMJ Radio. On Spreaker, it's MMJ Radio. CannabisTube.net. Also on Spreaker and iHeartRadio, it's the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Also, we're on Now TV, channel 937. We're also heard on 420radio.org. Thank you, Russ Belville, for that.
Shalom.